we have Madhubhashini Disanayake speaking to us here live via Zoom. Madhubhashini Disanayake Ratnayake is a senior lecturer in the Department of English Language Teaching at the University of Sri Jayewardenepura. Those who are familiar with Madhubhashini's work know that she does a lot of important work in destigmatizing Sri Lankan Englishers, if I may use that term. She is the Gratian Prize winner for her novel, There's Something I Have to Tell You. She is also a translator of Sinhala fiction to English. Madhubhashini, is there something you have to tell us today? You can start now.
Yes, good to see all of you. Let me talk, Santusha, mainly to the students today. And I'll start by spinning off some things that were said earlier. I'll start by the professor who spoke before me. I think the call is not to say that we should not try to learn what is called the standard English. Yes, you have to. Yes, you need to try and spell correctly. The call of accepting different standards is not to say anything goes. So I will start with the title that Santusha had used for a session, Does the Kadwa Hurt? Because I think it absolutely does. And my talk today is to tell you how maybe to handle that hurt, because to say that it doesn't hurt if you don't know English is to be blind to some social factors. For you medical students, I'll tell you the example. To come to a situation where you have to learn difficult content in a difficult language is problem enough. But I think to think that the social snobbery or the social class system doesn't exist in Sri Lanka now, to believe that is also to be rather blind into what's going on. I would say the situation now is probably a little bit worse than it was maybe 20 or 30 years ago, where many who came in didn't know English. So that I actually had another meeting with somebody a few days ago, and the majority were struggling with the language, and they all went through trying to learn English, just like the professor who spoke before said. But now the situation is a little bit different, where the centers in Sri Lanka, like Colombo or Kandy, might have pretty proficient students coming into the medical faculty, maybe from colleges which have a reputation of being absolutely bilingual. And they sit together with these students, and they're at a very young age. And I would be very surprised if they do not feel bad or socially inferior, or kind of a social hierarchy is maintained. It's very possible it's not seen by the lecturers. It can happen, but I do think it exists. And the reason I say it is this: during my time at the head of the ELTU at my campus, Japura, I used to talk to some of these students. They were sent to me just to chat, the people who are really scared. And it does affect young people, because that age is the time where your ego matters a lot. I mean, it matters till we die probably, but you're very, very, very sensitive about how others look at you. It doesn't have to be a comment saying your English is bad. Simply a look is enough. And I think anyone who is familiar with the social circuits of Colombo, someone speaks non-standard English, is just a look, that's enough. They look at each other. I'm sure you have done it yourself. If you all are, listening to me some senior people are listening to me. It's not open, it's not outright. Nobody is going to say there are different languages, it's okay. If somebody you think is not a native speaker of English tries to say something in English and makes a little mistake in Colombo, I'll be very surprised if nobody's looking at each other and gesturing. So it does exist. I think we have to admit that first. And I think as a community of doctors, your final destination may be to get up there, where you are fluent, where you are proficient, where you don't make spelling mistake. That's a journey that you have to reach. My appeal today is, while you go on that journey, try to understand why this is so, why you are scared, why you're laughed at. Because if you understand the historical reasons of why people behave this way, you might feel less hurt. And that is what I will try to do I have 20 minutes now. I'll try to do here. Okay. So I'm talking to the students here, and I'm going to go right back to colonialism, which Professor Mendes and everyone referred to. Because English came to us with a very painful experience of being subjugated by another race of people who, to subjugate us, had to do one thing first. Yes, they brought guns. But if you think about it, how did Britain, which is a small island, conquer half the planet? If you count the numbers of Indians, if they all rose up together, how could that small, British island actually do it? They did it, I think, mainly by this. They conquered our head first. They told our heads, that when I say our, I mean the natives, who were called the savages earlier. They told us, we are better than you. You cannot think of fighting us. You cannot rise up because we are superior human beings. That is called a mental subjugation, which had to happen. Because if you consider the numbers of the South Asians who the British conquered, we were so much more. But we did not dare rise up. Yes, the guns were there, I agree. But with the guns came something else, and that is called ideology. You know what an idea is, right? You all are all doctors, going to be doctors, and I know your intellect level is very high, just like most young people we have in this country. Idea is what you know what an idea is. Ideology is a network of ideas. And very often we don't even know the ideology that we have. It's given to us very quietly, in very clever fashion, right? You can also call the dominant ideology the hegemony. Hegemony is a particular group or a class thinks some values are the most important thing and quietly pass it to others, and not with might. You don't coerce them, but you pass it through a system. Could be the arts, could be education, sadly, we are all part of it, right? Could be systems. The very system will make you believe in a particular ideology. And you don't even know that this ideology has been constructed very definitely in a very purposeful fashion to serve a particular class or a group, right? I know you all are doctors and you do not really deal with ideology, because let me make this distinction between what you study and what I study. Your science is generally a positivist science. A positivist science is you deal with facts. You don't think about interpretation. Well, you should think about relative truths, because when you give medicine to somebody, it's, there is no, this can be right and wrong. It's a very positive science, medicine. Right now, when you join it with humanities, that's a separate thing. I'll deal with that later. But I deal with language. And in language, we even know that it's a non-positivist science. So there are different branches of it, like interpretivist, constructivist, different branches. You don't have to learn about it. But we don't deal with facts as objectifiable facts. Of course, we deal with facts, but because of the spreading of critical theory and all that, even statements can now be questioned, right? So remember this, everything I'm saying now deals with more humanities kind of subjects and not your positivist medical sciences. That's different. But when it comes to language learning and why you might feel sad about or feel inferior, like I'm not good enough, that is the first thing that happens to us when we think we don't know English, and when we sit with people who we think know English, we feel completely inferior. And to not admit that is to, again, I think, to be blind. Okay, so what I want to do today is, yes, you will feel inferior, but understand why. Because if you understand why, you might actually not feel hurt. That you will get the kadua, but that process is not going to hurt you because you all are young, and young people are very sensitive. Okay, so when the British people came, one of the things they did is they told us we were the savages. You can't even think of threatening us. And it's a very interesting fact to know that they brought with them English literature as well. Like, did you know that English literature was first taught in the colonies before it was taught in England? In England, they were learning Latin. So by bringing, I love Shakespeare, that's a different thing, but bringing Shakespeare, they said, this is the kind of person we have. Henry V, these are the kings we had. So they're just like showing their grandeur, they put them up on a pedestal. Language itself always helps the system. Language is a construction as well. So example, I want to make this, if I had a board, I always do this. See, the British people were fair. They were very fair, okay? So we were dark. Now, they had to assign that a value because if, for example, Sri Lanka is an island, but think of India, there are millions of dark people who look very different. So they had to associate darkness with something, fairness with something, right? And they were in charge of language. So what do you think they associated it with? Fair, they made beautiful. Dark, they made ugly. Because language works in opposite. If you have light on this side, you'll have darkness on this side. That's how it works. So, fair, dark, pretty, ugly, right? If I actually draw that line down, you will see how well it functions about how we think of ourselves even now. Yes, the British people have left, they've gone. But the power is still held by the centers through business, through a capitalist system. So one of the people who spoke about hegemony is Antonio Gramsci, and he's a Marxist thinker, right? Who says the whole system is geared to make sure of a capitalist system going on, because the people who were becoming powerful at the time that standard English was becoming standard in England. Remember, it wasn't always standard English. That was also a fight. So the English that became standardized, thereby the most powerful, was the language used by the middle class that was rising up through industry, through trade. So they made their English the standard English, and the different varieties dropped off. We got that through colonization, and we got it also within the system. Now, though the British have left, the international systems are still very much in place. If you take the World Bank or whatever, it's still the same thing. Take multinational companies. Why do you think Shah Rukh Khan is still selling Fair and Lovely stuff? You don't need British people to tell us that you look bad if you're dark. Our own people do it. They do it. He doesn't do it free, he gets paid for it. So I'll start with Fair and Lovely because it's connected to English. I'll show you how it's connected to English. So we are taught of how to think. Firstly, because all of us are taught, including me. For example, if you had a choice between learning English between a British Council teacher and a local one, and the question is asked, who will you prefer? You obviously say the British Council person, because it wouldn't even strike us. Somebody local might also be equally good. These have come down to us through centuries. So that if you don't know English, you're not part of the system, it's part of our thinking. So if you're not scared, I'll be very surprised. That's the first thing I say. If you tell me you don't know English and you don't feel bad about it, I'll be very surprised. Because it's all about power. The British people wanted power, therefore they had to make everyone who didn't know their language powerless. That came down to us through centuries. And now, though the British have left, they made sure that people who thought like them were left behind. Like whom we call Brown Sahibs. If you have the time, I don't think medical students have the time, but take a look at some of the old photographs, how our famous, I won't mention names, but our famous Sri Lankans are dressed for their weddings. Western veil, Western tie coat, looking very serious. So they made sure that the comparator class was left behind. And they are still here. So though you might not know it, some of the people who will say, okay, you're not us, are very closely gatekeeping to make sure they are still there, that others don't come in. I call them the gatekeepers. So very often it's a gatekeeper who does not want to contaminate their language use by getting other classes in, because finally it is about class, though we admit it or not. So I'm not saying a doctor should not know write English. Yes, please do it. But try to understand why that laughing at wrong English happens. More than the person who doesn't know English, the person who knows English is scared that his power base will be threatened. It's got to be protected, no? British people did it. Otherwise they'll be murdered because there were so few of them controlling the whole of India. So now what's happening is the people who are kind of born with English, they're called the native speakers, they want to make sure that that sanctity is maintained. So if they admit that that English is also intelligible, that English should also be respected, their power base gets a bit shaken. So they'll never admit it. So when I say these things, I'm actually talking to two kinds of people. To that powerful, who we call elites, right, who probably will not listen. And I'm also talking to the learners to say, understand why they will laugh at you. And don't get hurt. If you wish, get angry, but know why it's happening. That also comes from a sense of inferiority. That's how we got English. So it's not that they are not feeling inferior, they are, but you're a threat because you give a different position. You give a different outlook, a different background, and you're trying to come there. So the groups are always very small. They want to keep it small. There'll be gatekeepers who will say shoo shoo. Doctors are luckier than most because you always somehow get it, like it or not. But I'm in the arts field and I know some of us don't. We just simply don't. So all I do is make them feel less sad about it, less hurt about it, because that's a historical fact. And once you realize why this has happened, you have such a sense of empowerment because it has nothing to do with you. You not knowing English, not learning it now has everything to do with you. But you coming there not knowing is a historical incident that happened because of the way education was distributed in this country. So if you came to the medical faculty from a very rural area, don't feel bad. Learn it. You'll probably have to work harder. All I'm saying is, on that journey, try not to feel hurt if others laugh at you. If others laugh at you, and they will, understand where the laughter is coming from. That they also would have been laughed at some point, and that was the way they made sure they were not laughed at. I'm talking about, generations back though, about colonialism. So it's try to understand that. It's better if you don't feel angry because you can't really like something you're angry about. So English is one of the most hegemonic ways in which the world is kept in place now. And it's, I just have 5 minutes, so I'll have to hurry this up. Even if you want to be a professor, you need to, if you have a PhD, and also you need journals published, right? What happens to somebody who doesn't write in English? That is all. So there are methods. You're in the world system only through this language, and that's one of the ways in which English maintains its power. Though we also know it. I mean, we know it, but there's nothing, unless you go out of the planet, you are in the power system. So I'm not saying be angry and say, I don't want any part of it. No. Like my next public speaking event is at the British Council. So it's not that I'm saying hands off. You've got to understand it and know the systems within which you work. Very often we don't. We are not aware of ideology. Everything is ideological. Your dress is ideological, your hair is ideological, and you as doctors belong in a particular group and you might have to adapt to it. That's exactly what the professor who spoke before said. Yes, you've got to. Even dress is different. Because hair, shoes, everything is political. And I know the doctor, like you can in Sinhala you can call it a kulaya. It's a particular group, it's a particular community. And if you are going to belong into the community, try to adapt as much as possible. There is no question about that. But don't feel bad on the way there. Try to understand the historical conditions that made you feel bad. Because see, light, dark, fair, ugly. If I tell, I'm sorry, I wish I could have spoken to you in person, because I asked them, okay, if you say good and bad, where will you put it? Where does good come? On the fair side or the dark side? Then they say good comes on the fair side. Okay, because I think naturally fair people have a better chance of being seen as good people. Then I say, okay, sarong and tie and shirt. Where would you put a man in sarong and where would you put a man in tie and shirt? Okay, and naturally, I wish I could do this live. The tie and shirt man goes under the good column and the sarong man goes under the bad column. Then I ask, okay, stupid and brainy, where does that go? Again, brainy goes under the tie and coat person. Stupid goes under the dark, ugly sarong person. The last question I ask, you can do this in so many times, and then I say, okay, knowing English and not knowing English. Where does knowing English go? Knowing English goes under the good. Not knowing English goes under the bad. So that mentally we have naturalized. Remember, I didn't say natural. There are things we naturalize in this country. Right? For example, there's no time to go for many things, but remember that advertisements are the best ones for stereotyping people. They are really good. Garu Amma Varune and a gas can, they completely naturalize the fact that it's the mother who's doing the cooking, never the man, as if he can't. And then when I discuss critical reading with my students, I ask them to give me some names of famous cooks. Habilis, Lloyd, all male. That's it. Stereotyping is done brilliantly on advertisements. Let me, Prasad, can you, just before I finish, Prasad, can you put slide 1? It's done internationally, not just in this country. I gave some slides yesterday just to show you how this is done. Make it bigger, Prasad. Look at this. This is Nivea. Look at the words. Re-civilize yourself. Civilize means to be decent, nice, accepted. What does the man have to do? He's throwing away the face that looks African. That is the savage. And this is not history. This is now. He has to throw away who he is, cut his hair short like a white man, dress nicely to re-civilize. Civilization is that. Okay, we do this in horribly. I hope Prasad, second one. I hope this is not true, but I've seen this on Facebook. Second slide, Prasad. Look at this. Okay, it had particularly shocked me because I told you about the beauty ugly thing. Look at this textbook. This is so horrible. I hope this is made up because by beautiful, fair skin, dark skin. Not only that, look at the danger. Poor, rich, this woman has a jewelry thing. That woman has a native coat too. And that is under ugly. I'll tell you, I don't know whether doctors go into Facebook very much, but if you are on social media, there are variations of this. Have you all seen junior batch, one of them, my batch, this person? The same variation in new form without realizing what they are doing. Darkness, look, ugly. So clearly put. And beautiful, fair. Golden hair. So if I don't know whether this is true, but if an Indian textbook had it, they are calling their own people ugly as opposed to a beautiful white. Is she white? I don't know, white person. Okay, and look, this doesn't only happen in obvious ways like this. It can even happen in cartoons. Last one, Prasad, the last one. I don't know whether you all seen the film Lion King. You'll wonder why I'm bringing animals, but I'll show you. if I were to ask you, this is Lion King, Mufasa and Scar, love the film by the way, that's a different thing. If I ask you, if you were to put two people instead of these two lions, who would you put Mufasa to be? I'm sorry, I don't get the answers because I'm doing this online. Mufasa would probably be a white man. See, square jaw and all that. And Scar would probably be an Oriental person, Indian or Arabian, pointy, black. Even through children's films, they put the Indian-looking, Arabian-looking, dark-haired person as the villain. And this very straightforward-looking, handsome lion is golden. Probably the British impact. So it's still happening. If you watch Aladdin, the film Aladdin, the very first scene has the monkey stealing something. So this is called Orientalism. Okay, enough of the slides. Thank you, Prasad. I don't have time. I'm going to finish now. But there are books that we read in our disciplines. A book called Orientalism, where Edward Said showed how clearly Western scholarship looked at the East. These are our characteristics. We are a bit sly. We are like not very straightforward. We don't speak. So we have been stereotyped so clearly by the West, and when we learn mainly in English, sometimes we take it without knowing that we are taking it. Without knowing that we are also should have been on the other side, but we are on this side. For example, if you watch Tarzan, when Tarzan is fighting the savages, you'll probably be on Tarzan's side, right? Without realizing the creator, we are the savages he's fighting. So, especially us who know English and another language, we might not exactly know where we belong. Even that is fine. To be complex is to be human. All I'm asking today is for the medical faculty students, if there are any of you among whom there are people feeling bad about not knowing English, it's very, very common. I'll be surprised if it wasn't the case. But if you understand the history, this is too short a talk for me to go into detail. Try to read these books like Orientalism and Arjuna Parakrama's book, Dehegemonizing Language Standards, where Thirukandai also has written an introduction. Please read them, where he has theorized what's happening here. That standardization is a part of keeping people out, so that a group remains powerful. We can't change the system, so you try to cross the line. Become part of the powerful, but once you become that, please do not make the mistake of looking down on a learner. I wish I could make an appeal for great understanding, which I think Professor Mendis did the same, that we should all understand that this is all of us are in the path of learning. Even British people you wouldn't believe how many mistakes they make. And we propagate it. Look at some of our advertisements advertising English. The girl has to be patted on the head by a foreigner for it to be, we are still colonized, some of us, most of us actually, right? So understand that, read up on post-colonial theory, read up on why you should not feel bad about not even knowing a word of English, because that doesn't mean you're stupid. It means that you haven't had access to it. But now that you're in medical faculty, you don't have a choice. You need to join that group, which has a particular way of dressing, particular way of speaking, particular way of talking. Join it. You'll have to probably work double to do that. But in the process, don't feel bad about yourself, because that has nothing to do with you, not your personal circumstances. So if I'm going to end now, but all I want to say now is, get the kadua. You need the kadua. It's a weapon. Kadua can be used for good and bad, right? But don't feel hurt on the path that you go to get it, and know why you're feeling inferior if that has been what you've been suffering for. You don't have a reason to be so. It's a very historical process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madhubhashini. Absolutely provoking, strong sentiments there. We are going to now venture into the question and answer session. So much of vibrant conversation going in the chat box, which you probably would not have seen. I am going to come back to you, Madhubhashini. But first of all, let me ask my one question from Professor Dushanti Mendis first. Professor Mendes, to anyone who's struggling with the English language in our medical faculty here today, what is your advice to them?
Thank you, Santosha. Learning any language is difficult. It's not just English. So what I would say is, don't give up. As Madhu also said, don't feel hurt if somebody laughs at you. Don't feel hurt if somebody puts you down. Don't give up. Keep at it. And what I would also say is, I would personally say, don't strive to aim for absolute perfection, because I don't think any of us are perfect speakers of English or any language for that matter. So strive for, as I said earlier, intelligibility and making yourself understood. Don't give up. That's my advice.
Thank you, Professor Mendes. And I'm going to quickly go to Lavanya Vijaysekar, our poet here today. Lavanya, when we were discussing this program in preparation towards today, you mentioned something, another phenomenon that you observed when you were a medical student in the Faculty of Medicine here. You called it reverse linguicism. Would you like to comment?
I wouldn't say I faced it personally, because I was not in the elite group of the Colombo people in the university. I came from Bandaragada, but I saw this happening. There were a clique of people who come from Colombo and the affluent areas. So, like Dr. Madhubhashini told, there was a distinct aura about them. And the rest of the batch, the rest of the students look at them in a different kind of way. So there were instances that these people were ridiculed for their English, and because they were brought up in a background where the English would have been their first language in such an affluent society. So they were slightly, subtly ridiculed for that as well. And I've heard a lot of stories from my colleagues that would kind of say the other way about the posh people or the posh groups of the batches. So that's what I meant by the reverse linguicism. I don't think it affects the academic stuff, but when it comes to the interaction among a batch or among students or colleagues, that has some effects. Some people feel reluctant to get close to that kind of people or that. And I would like to mention some interesting fact about Dr. Madhubhashini's speech, because to go through the pathway, I personally have walked through that pathway, because I came to Colombo from suburbs, and I walked that path. My parents didn't speak English, so I just walked that path. And it's always been a nice journey, I would say.
And could I just have a rejoinder to what she said? Can I have a rejoinder here?
Yes, of course.
I was very interested. Lavanya said a very important thing. There is also anger among the non-speakers against those who know English as well. That is very common. And the one thing which is very common now is this word posh. Api posh when known, and posh, it is used with such bitterness and anger, which is not helping matters, because they really, again, there's no time to go into it, but that doesn't help, because it's whatever the attitudes they have, you can sympathize, but to be angry and say these posh people don't understand us, that kind of simple dichotomy doesn't help the process, right? And one thing which we tried to do, Santosha, may I talk about the Bhasha Buddies here? One thing we tried to do.
Yes, Madhu, I actually want to bring that into the discussion.
Yeah.
Now you have given us the backdrop of this problem. What are the practical things you have done to address these problems in the university settings? Yes, all Madhu, right. Please.
Yes, I'm very keen to talk about this because, as English language teachers, and I'm in the Department of English Language Training, we always tell our people to practice English, right? But one thing we forget is very often 95% of Sri Lankans don't have a chance to practice. With whom do they speak with, right? So sometimes we say speak with your friend. And once in the cyber world, someone very nicely told me I don't have friends who can speak in English. So a group of us got together, like we started it our faculty, whom you might call posh, Lavanya, some of us got together, not posh people, but people who knew English at a particular standard. We are all learning. Huh? They provide, we become the buddies, and we provide on SIMs, a text, phones, where we get a SIM from the campus. We are all anonymous, where we talk to people less proficient who wait for a chance to practice. Right? So we have 1 hour a week set out for that, and they apply through a website in our campus, and we speak to them on texting, on chat, 1 hour a week. So they don't now have the excuse of saying, I have no one to talk to in English. They have us. We have got 331 applicants to date. We are still only 100. We started with 10. Now we are close to 100. Just people volunteering who know language, and always supervised by an ESL teacher. I mean, I won't go into the process there, but there are things we can do. And that kind of encounter can't happen, as Lavanya said, if there's anger among those people for these people being posh. So
yes,
we need to go close.
Yes,
We've got
Sorry, please carry on, Madhu. Sorry, I disturbed.
What I'm saying, Santosha, both groups have to move to a middle. Not just one group trying to help. It's not patronizing. It's not that, oh, here we are helping. It's not that. As teachers, we understand that it's like telling person to learn English without giving a chance to practice. It's like telling someone to swim without getting into the water. It's like telling someone to play the violin without giving them the violin. Right? So let's make the playing field more equal. Right? And I'm delighted to say that this idea has taken root, and the medical faculty in our campus, Japura, might actually have their own Bhasha Buddy cells to help their first years or the people who are just coming in. There are ways, and there are people willing to help. We need to get the ideas across and put the practice space together. Thank you, Santosh.
Right. Madhu, thank you very much. I think we have, this is a compelling thought for us to actually think forward and to entertain this thought and think further. I have received a private message from one of the students. I think Professor Panduka Karanayaka, Professor Predashini Galapati, Professor Sarojai Singh, and many other professors have actually joined this forum today. Probably she's not actually asking a question. She is sharing a thought, but I think it's very important that I share it. I'm not mentioning her name. On the topic of bilingual learning situation in peer learning context within our batch, often a bilingual approach is taken, where the medical terms are English, while the explanations switch between languages. However, I'm curious about what kind of effect this has on the unity of the batch, as it tends to cause separation between Tamil and Sinhala speakers. Sinhala speakers making up the majority, most of the peer learning situations seem to cater to this. Sometimes lecturers also slip into their mother tongue during explanations, and I'm wondering whether this alienates non-Sinhala speakers. The online learning context has also aggravated this issue, as we are now blind to non-verbal. As we are blind to non-verbal communication and social cues guide us through these situations. I'm not sure how this situation can be resolved. Just some thoughts. Would somebody in this forum like to take this as a question and comment?
I think Professor Mendis would have a lot to say. Now, I think also Dinali. Dinali is also from Kalani. She was the earlier head of DELT, the lady who spoke before Santosha. I'll just start by saying this is a national problem that we have by all of us not being trilingual. I wish all of us, if our education had been different, knew Tamil as well. Because the moment we say mother tongue, and if we mean Sinhala, that naturally isolates a group of students who are Tamil speakers. So this is a problem. And I remember Dinali making this, I always say speak English our way, no? And then I remember her telling they had used that motto for some national thing. And then the question had arisen like, what is our? Is it Sinhala or the Tamil our? Dinali, are you here?
Yes, Madhu, I'm here.
Why don't you continue? This is your thing.
you. Okay. Actually what happened was about 10 years ago, everyone might remember, the project was a very much a government fronted project soon after the war to promote a local variety of English in education and speech. But that slogan, Speak English Our Way, was rejected by Jaffna academics, saying our way is once again the Sinhala way, and you're once again discriminating against the minority languages. So that's what happened. And actually the heads of the project, very senior government officials, immediately dropped that slogan from the campaign.
These are things we don't remember, we don't realize, because I think there was a point when you say our in a multi-ethnic country, very validly the question can be asked, what is our then? So that question is very valid, Santusha. When you slip into Sinhala, then you should also have a space to slip into Tamil as well. And that's practically impossible because most of the Sinhala speakers don't know Tamil. So these are actual practical questions for which you might have to find answers. That is why I'm saying the eventual answer would be everybody being proficient in English. If we can somehow do it without making people feel bad. That's all I'm saying. So that they would then not fear to use wrong English in class if everybody is in the attitude of not being judged. The Bhasha Buddies are brilliant because it's a non-judgmental space. So people will try to use wrong, substandard English if they are not judged, I feel. That may be the way to go.